In 1991, Mercedes-Benz was the most desirable car brand in the world. Its two-seat roadster, the R129 SL500, was on every waiting list in every market that mattered. Princess Diana had just traded her Jaguar for one. It had been launched at the Geneva Motor Show over 2 years earlier to a reaction so immediate and so intense that the factory had to warn buyers that delivery would take several years. That same year, Lexus introduced a two-door Grand Tourer called the SC400, carrying the same V8 engine they had used to embarrass the Germans in the sedan market. It won Motor Trend Import Car of the Year. Car and Driver put it on their 10 best list, where it stayed for 5 consecutive years. The automotive press called it one of the finest luxury coupes available at any price. Nobody put it on a waiting list. Nobody wrote about it in the tabloids. Nobody had to be pressured by Buckingham Palace to give it back. The Mercedes became a legend. The Lexus became a bargain. One of those outcomes was earned, the other was manufactured. And 30 years later, when both cars are available for roughly the same money, the question of which one is actually worth owning has a clearer answer than the legend would suggest. Is the R129 SL a great car, or simply a famous one? To find out, you have to go back to Geneva in March of 1989, and the moment Bruno Sacco's team unveiled something that the market had been waiting for without knowing it. Before we continue, check the link in the description below to get your used car buying guide and avoid getting scammed or overpaying. In 1989, Mercedes-Benz replaced the most beloved roadster they had ever built, the Mercedes-Benz R129 SL. The R107 it replaced had been in production for 18 years. It was the car that film directors put in driveways when they wanted to signal that a character had made it. It was the car that business owners bought the day they turned 40. Understated, overbuilt, almost entirely unchanging through a decade and a half of production. Replacing it required something that could claim a direct lineage without looking like a compromise, and something that could justify a price that had grown considerably beyond what the R107 had asked. It was unveiled at the Geneva Motor Show in March of 1989, to a reaction that no automotive press event generates unless the car is genuinely exceptional. The planned annual production capacity of 20,000 units sold out immediately. Delivery periods of several years became standard. Any conversation with a Mercedes dealer in the first 2 years of the R129's existence ended with the same answer. There is a waiting list, and joining it does not guarantee much. It deserved the reaction. It was a genuinely great car, built by engineers who had spent 5 years making it so. To understand what produced that reaction, and why the car's reputation has outlasted the ownership reality that lay beneath it, you have to go back to 1984, the year Bruno Sacco's team received the brief, and the moment Mercedes decided what the R107's successor would need to be. The R107 that the R129 replaced had been a commercial success that created a specific problem. When a car stays in production for 18 years, its buyers develop expectations about what it should feel like, sound like, and represent. The SL buyer of 1989 expected a certain weight in the steering wheel, a certain sound from the engine, a certain quality in the materials, and a certain reassurance that whatever they were spending on this car was not going to look embarrassing in 3 years' time. What they did not expect, and what Mercedes decided they needed to provide, was a car that could pass as contemporary in an era that had produced the Porsche 928, the Ferrari Testarossa, and the first Japanese luxury cars capable of challenging the German standard on refinement. The brief that went to Sacco's department in 1984 was clear in its goals and demanding in its execution. The R129 had to be beautiful enough to justify the price increase over the R107. It had to be technically advanced enough to represent Mercedes' leadership in automotive safety, the same leadership that the W126 S-Class had established in the previous decade with its airbag and seatbelt pre-tensioner program. And it had to feel, to the person behind the wheel on an open road, like something designed specifically for that moment rather than adapted from a platform that had been built to carry 4 doors and a boot. Johan Tomforda, working under Sacco's direction, refined the exterior shape and finalized it by the mid-1980s. The result, which earned the International Car Design Award within a year of the car's launch, stands as one of the finest proportioned 2-seat roadsters of its era. The long bonnet, the compact rear, the subtle wedge in the profile. The way the surfaces flow from the front to back without the hard edges and character line interruptions that defined most contemporary automotive design. Sacco had spent his entire career at Mercedes arguing that good design ages slowly, that the correct measure of a design is not how exciting it looks on the day of the press reveal, but how it looks a decade later when the fashions have moved on and the surfaces have to stand on their own. The R129 makes that argument in its proportions. 4 decades after Geneva, it still looks right. The R129 was built in Bremen rather than Sindelfingen, where Mercedes produced its main model range. The decision was capacity-driven. Bremen had the space and the workforce. But the outcome was that the R129 team operated in relative isolation from the larger Mercedes manufacturing culture. This separation, which could have produced neglect, instead produced focus. The Bremen team built the R129 with the attention of a facility that knew it was producing the company's most visible product, in the most scrutinized segment, for the most demanding buyers. The first cars left Bremen in the summer of 1989. By autumn, the waiting list that had formed at European dealers had extended to 3 and 4 years. The R129 was not simply a roadster. It was a technical demonstration. The automatic rollover bar is the achievement that defined the car. Every convertible before it had required the driver to either accept the absence of rollover protection or live with a permanent fixed hoop that compromised the visual purity of the design. Mercedes engineers solved this with a mechanism that has not been improved upon in the decades since. A U-shaped steel tube, foam padded with polyurethane, sits stored in front of the soft top compartment in its rest position, forming a level surface with the tonneau cover lid. Sensors monitor the car's attitude continuously. When the sensors detect that the body has tilted beyond 26 degrees and a rear wheel has left the ground, the bar fires electromagnetically, driven upward by pre-compressed springs, and locks into position with pawls in 0.3 of a second. Not 3 seconds, 0.3. The driver has done nothing. The car has decided that the situation requires the bar and has deployed it before a human nervous system would have registered the problem. This mechanism exists at the intersection of passive and active safety. It requires no driver input and makes no demands on driver awareness. It is simply there, waiting for the circumstance that requires it, and responding at a speed that makes the circumstance survivable. The first reactive passive safety system of its kind in automotive history, and it was standard equipment on every R129 built. The seatbelts continue this philosophy. The R129 uses seats with integrated seatbelt systems. The belt mounting is part of the seat structure rather than the B-pillar, because the R129 has no fixed B-pillar when the roof is down. Mercedes' engineers spent enough time developing these seats to file more than 20 patents covering the detail solutions. The creator of the system received the Paul Piech Prize, one of the most significant awards in German automotive engineering, for the work in 1989, the same year the car launched. These are not marketing innovations. They are engineering achievements that received formal recognition from the engineering community. The electro-hydraulic soft top is the third pillar of the R129's technical identity. Press a single button and the top opens, folds, and stores itself in its compartment within 30 seconds. The windows lower automatically, The tonneau cover rises to accept the folded roof, and the cover closes again when the sequence is complete. In 1989, this felt like something from a car show concept rather than a production vehicle. Mercedes made it standard equipment. The suspension is a double wishbone front and multi-link rear arrangement developed from the W124 platform on which the R129's floor pan was based. The wheelbase was shortened from the W124 sedan to suit the Roadster's proportions, and the suspension calibration was revised accordingly. An optional adaptive damping system allowed the driver to adjust the damping characteristics between comfort and sport modes, one of the earliest production implementations of electronically adjustable suspension at this price point. The 5-liter V8 in the 500 SL produces 322 horsepower in early specification. It does not murmur or suggest its capability. It announces itself. At idle, it has a presence that the SC400's 1UZ-FE deliberately suppresses. At full throttle, it generates a sound that the engineering team allowed because it matched the character of the car they were building. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour arrives in under 7 seconds. The electronically limited top speed of 250 kilometers per hour is reached without drama. The weight is the single most honest fact about the R129's driving character. At launch in 1989, the 500 SL weighed approximately 1,800 kilograms. By 1994, as additional systems were added across the production run, the weight had grown to 1,855 kilograms. The car gained approximately 200 kilograms of additional systems across its 12-year production life. This is the weight of a car designed to provide comfort and safety and technology at the highest level, not the weight of a car designed to communicate. It communicates what it communicates because the engineers built it accurately. It does not communicate what a lighter car would communicate because no engineer was asked to make it lighter. The R129 became famous for reasons that had nothing to do with its technical specifications and everything to do with who chose it. In December of 1991, Princess Diana made a decision that would produce more column inches than any automotive review that year or the next. She traded her Jaguar XJ-SC for a metallic red R129 500 SL delivered to her just before Christmas. The decision made her the first member of the British royal family to privately drive a foreign car, and the media reaction was immediate and extraordinary. Buckingham Palace issued a statement clarifying that the car had been leased for personal use. Government ministers expressed concern about royal patronage of British industry. Trade union leaders added their voices. None of it diminished the image that the photographs created. The most photographed woman in the world, in a red Mercedes SL, in a cloud of genuine controversy about whether she should be permitted to drive what she wanted. The controversy lasted until September of 1992, when Diana returned the car under the accumulated weight of public pressure. The car went back to Germany. It now resides in the Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart, parked next to the Popemobile, 2 cars side by side that represent entirely different ideas about what a vehicle can mean to the person who chose it and the institution that received it back. The impact of Diana's choice on the R129's public profile cannot be understated. Until the Mazda MX-5 took its place, the R129 was for many years the best-selling convertible in the world, and part of that success traced directly to the attention generated by the controversy. A princess had chosen it over a century of protocol. The market had noticed. The R129 was also the car that AMG turned into something genuinely alarming for buyers who found the standard car insufficiently dramatic. The SL60 AMG, sold from 1993 to 1998, used a 6-liter V8 producing 381 horsepower and could reach 100 kilometers per hour in 5.6 seconds. The SL73 AMG which arrived in 1997, carried a 7.3-liter engine producing 525 horsepower, the most powerful V12 engine ever fitted to an SL. These were the cars for buyers who had already owned a standard R129 and concluded that the experience was correct in all the ways that the badge implied, but that the numbers left room for argument. The mainstream SL500 sold in quantities that confirmed the market's enthusiasm. Of the 204,940 R129s built across 12 years of production, approximately half were V8 powered, roughly 100,000 SL500s in total, each representing a buyer who wanted exactly what the car represented: the Mercedes Roadster, the famous SL, the car that everyone recognized even if they had never sat in one and could not identify it from a photograph without the badge. This is the R129's extraordinary cultural accomplishment. It produced a reputation that exists largely independent of the driving experience. An R129 owner's identity as an owner is shaped by everything the car means to people who have never sat in one: a waiting list, a princess forced by protocol to return it, a badge that needs no explanation in any country where Mercedes sells cars. These are the foundations of legends, and the R129's legend is genuine and deserved. The question this comparison forces is whether genuine fame is the same thing as genuine value, and the answer requires examining what happens when the famous car is 30 years old and both cars are available for the same price. The R129 SL ages in ways that its reputation does not prepare buyers for. The electro-hydraulic soft-top system, the same feature that made the car feel futuristic at its introduction, is the R129's defining maintenance challenge. The system operates through 12 hydraulic cylinders on 1990 to 1996 models, and 11 cylinders on later examples. These cylinders control every function of the roof sequence: the front latch release, the main lift, the bow extension, the tonneau cover, the rear bow window latch. The cylinders operate at pressures exceeding 2,000 pounds per square inch. The seals inside these cylinders are made of material that degrades not through use, but through time and heat. An R129 that has been stored in a garage for 10 years, its soft top never operated, arrives at the same seal condition as one that has been driven daily. The chemistry of degradation does not require operation to proceed. The seals simply age in the hydraulic fluid, losing their integrity and eventually allowing fluid to bypass them. Atlantic Motor Car Center, one of the more respected independent Mercedes specialists in the Northeast United States, describes the failure mode precisely. The hydraulic seals do not wear out in the way that a brake pad wears out. They disintegrate. Sections of degraded seal material break away and contaminate the hydraulic fluid. The damage is progressive and self-accelerating. When the seals begin to fail, the symptoms are specific: a soft top that operates slowly, a soft top that stops partway through its cycle and requires manual intervention, a soft top that will not close in the rear because the bow latch cylinders have lost enough pressure to miss the catch, and in more advanced cases, hydraulic fluid pooling in the boot on the rear bodywork or dripping from the front latch cylinders onto the windshield surround. The correct repair is comprehensive replacement of all cylinders simultaneously. Replacing individual cylinders as they fail is a losing strategy because the cylinders that have not yet shown symptoms are at the same age and in the same fluid as the one that just failed, and replacing one while leaving 11 in degraded condition produces a second repair visit within 18 months. A comprehensive rebuild from a specialist using upgraded seal materials is the industry standard recommendation. The cost at a Mercedes dealer for comprehensive cylinder replacement is several $1,000s in parts alone, plus the labor for a job that requires the car to be correctly disassembled, the cylinders removed and rebuilt or replaced, and the system bled and synchronized before the roof will again cycle correctly. This is not a criticism of the R129's engineering. The hydraulic soft top was a genuine achievement in 1989. The degradation of its seals is the predictable consequence of 30-year-old synthetic materials in a high-pressure fluid environment. The same degradation that affects every complex hydraulic system of this vintage. It simply costs more to address in an R129 than in almost any other car of comparable age and price, because the system is more complex, more proprietary, and more labor-intensive to reach correctly. The oil leaks are an additional reality. The M119 V8 develops leaks from camshaft housing gaskets, valve cover gaskets, and oil cooler seals at high mileages, as the synthetic rubber compounds that seal these joints age and contract. None of these are structural failures. All of them are repairable, but they require a mechanic who understands the specific engine and is willing to spend the time that correct repair demands. At a Mercedes specialist, they are manageable. At a general shop unfamiliar with the M119, they become expensive experiments. The honest summary of R129 ownership is this: a well-maintained example in the hands of an owner who understands its specific requirements is a deeply satisfying car to own. A neglected example purchased because the badge and the price seemed like an opportunity is a different experience entirely. The R129's glamour is real. Its maintenance appetite is also real. The two coexist in every example currently on the market. That is the famous car. A car so beautiful that a princess chose it over a century of royal protocol, and so desirable that buyers waited years for the privilege of owning it. A car with a rollover bar that fires in 0.3 of a second, seatbelts with 20 patents, and a hydraulic roof system that was nothing short of engineering theater in 1989. A genuine legend built at genuine cost, with genuine consequences for the owner who inherits that cost 30 years later. The car on the other side of this comparison arrived 2 years after the R129, at less than half its price, with no waiting list and no tabloid coverage and no princess. The press loved it. The public largely missed it, and the buyers who did choose it have been driving the same engines with the same reliability for 3 decades, while R129 owners have been managing hydraulic systems whose seals age whether the roof gets used or not. To understand how a car that nobody talked about can be worth more than a car everyone remembers, you have to go back to 1987, and the moment a California design studio received a brief to build a luxury coupe for a brand that had just changed the luxury car market and needed to prove it could do it twice. In the autumn of 1989, Lexus had changed what was possible in a luxury sedan. The LS400 had arrived at $35,000, passed every comparison test it entered, and forced BMW to publicly accuse Toyota of selling the car below cost because no other explanation seemed available for how a $35,000 car could beat a $60,000 one on refinement. 2 years later, Lexus needed to prove the first car was not an accident. The Lexus SC400. It arrived in June of 1991 as a 1992 model at a base price of approximately $37,500. The Mercedes R129 500 SL was selling at more than $80,000. The BMW 8 Series started at the same figure. The SC400 carried the same V8 that had gone into the LS400 and was available for less than half the price of either German alternative. Motor Trend made it Import Car of the Year for 1992. Car and Driver put it on their 10 best list and left it there through 1996. 5 consecutive years. The press knew exactly what it was. The public, still adjusting to the idea that Lexus built sedans, was less certain where to place a coupe. To understand why a car this well-regarded failed to generate the waiting lists and the cultural noise of its German competitor, you have to go back to 1987 and a design studio in Newport Beach, California, where two designers were working in 3 dimensions rather than 2, shaping a car that would take 30 years to fully earn its reputation. The external design of the SC400 was not developed in Japan. It was developed in Newport Beach, California, at Calty Design Research, Toyota's American design studio, established in 1973 as the first California-based design center for any major automotive manufacturer. The brief reached Calty in 1987. The car needed to complement the LS400 sedan without copying it. It needed to establish a distinct identity for Lexus as a company capable of building a coupe, not just a sedan, and it needed to work visually in the American market, where the buyers Toyota was targeting would evaluate it against the Mercedes SL and the BMW 8 Series, and would make their decisions based on what they saw from 50 feet away in a parking lot. Designers Dennis Campbell and Erwin Louis, working at the Calty studio in Newport Beach, took an approach to developing the body that was unusual for the period. Rather than working primarily in 2-dimensional sketches, as most studios did, they built 3-dimensional plaster forms, balloon-shaped plaster models that allowed them to study the body surfaces as light played across them, rather than as lines on paper. Toyota's Calty press materials describe this as an experiment in organic form, the discovery that surfaces which read correctly in 3 dimensions can look wrong in flat renderings, and that surfaces which look impressive in a rendering can look hollow or uncertain in clay. The SC400's body is the product of that 3-dimensional study. Its surfaces do not have the hard edges and defined character lines that were conventional in 1991. They have a softness, a continuity of surface from nose to tail that reads as effortless rather than designed. Louis' production design concept was approved at the beginning of 1989, and Louis was subsequently sent to Japan for 4 months to assist in completing the production design, the translation from approved concept to manufacturable body. The car that emerged from this process has a drag coefficient of 0.31, on par with the 4th-generation Toyota Supra, and substantially better than most luxury coupes of the period. The surfaces that produced it are the same ones that automotive writers in 2020 began calling timeless, having spent the intervening 30 years calling the car underappreciated. Production of the Soarer, the Japanese market equivalent, began in April of 1991 at the Motomachi plant in Toyota City. The Lexus SC400 was produced alongside it at the Higashi Fuji plant in Susono, Shizuoka. The same facility also produced the A80 generation Toyota Supra, a detail that captures something about the engineering culture that produced all 3 cars. The platform was shared, the discipline was common, the ambition was applied equally across all 3. The SC400 was never sold in Japan. Japanese buyers who wanted this car bought a Toyota Soarer. The Lexus brand did not operate in Japan until 2005, when it was finally launched in the home market. The SC400 was designed in California for American buyers, built in Japan, and sold exclusively in export markets, where the Lexus name carried the weight of everything the LS400 had established 2 years earlier. The SC400 central engineering argument is contained in a single price comparison, $37,500 versus $83,500. The buyer paying the lower figure received the same V8 engine, a more aerodynamically efficient body, and a reliability record that the higher-priced alternative has never approached. The 1UZ-FE in the SC400 is the same engine that went into the LS400, with a slightly lower compression ratio. It was developed at a cost reportedly exceeding $400 million, a figure that Toyota invested in producing an aluminum V8 that would be the foundation of the Lexus brand's technical reputation for the following 2 decades. 250 horsepower at launch. 260 for 1996 and 1997, 290 with variable valve timing from 1998. The engine's character is the same in the SC400 as in the LS400. Linear, unhurried, entirely disinterested in drama. Throttle response is immediate and proportional. The power delivery builds from idle to redline, without the step changes that indicate a narrow power band or aggressive camshaft profiles. The exhaust note is present but restrained, audible at full throttle, inaudible in the kind of conversation that SC400 buyers expected to have at motorway speeds. At 6,000 revolutions per minute, it sounds like a well-designed V8. At 3,000, it sounds like a luxury car. Both of these things are true simultaneously. The chassis is a front-engine, rear-wheel drive platform with double wishbone suspension at all four corners. The calibration is set for ride quality first and handling second, not because the SC400 is incapable of responding to a committed driver, but because its intended buyer was not a committed driver. Drove the car with authority, and it is composed and direct. Pushed it to its limit, and it understeers gently and predictably. This is exactly the character that a well-executed Grand Tourer should have, and it is the character that the development team targeted. The door hinges are the SC400's most celebrated mechanical detail, and the one that reveals the most about the engineering culture that produced the car. The doors are large and heavy, the consequence of the SC's four-passenger, two-door configuration. Conventional hinges on a door of this weight require the driver or passenger to step backward while opening, creating an awkward sequence in tight parking situations. The SC400's four-link hinge mechanism swings the door outward and simultaneously forward as it opens, moving the leading edge of the door away from the adjacent car or person before the door's full width is deployed. The result is a door that requires less clearance to open fully than a conventionally hinged door of comparable size. Haggerty's buyer's guide observed that this mechanism was more sophisticated than the rear suspension on many pickup trucks of the period. The comparison is pointed. Toyota was engineering a door hinge for a Grand Tourer with the same seriousness that most manufacturers applied to suspension geometry. The interior reflects the same priorities. Wood trim applied with the grain matched at the joins. Leather that Haggerty's 19-year-old test car, a 27,000-mile Lexus-owned example, wore as if it were still new. A Nakamichi audio system available as an option that remains one of the finest factory-fitted sound installations of its era. Climate control that operates without requiring the driver to manage it. Everything in the SC400's interior was calibrated to the expectation that a buyer spending $37,000 in 1991 would be evaluated against whoever was spending $83,000 on the same day, and could not afford to lose that comparison. The active suspension system available on the Japanese market Toyota Soarer, a fully active setup that was, at the time, the most sophisticated production vehicle suspension in existence, was not offered on the U.S. market SC400. Toyota's assessment was that the added complexity and cost was inappropriate for the price point and the target buyer, and that the conventional steel springs and dampers available on the SC400 provided the correct balance of comfort and control for the car's market. This was a deliberate choice rather than a cost-saving compromise, and it reflects the engineering judgment that produced a car with no unnecessary complexity, the same judgment that makes the SC400 straightforward and inexpensive to maintain at age 30 compared to its competitors. The SC400 entered the market in 1992 and immediately began collecting the kind of recognition that should have generated the cultural attention the R129 was enjoying. It did not generate it because awards are not tabloids and press list positions are not princesses. Motor Trend awarded it Import Car of the Year for 1992. The same award, the Mercedes W126 300 SD, had won 11 years earlier as the first large vehicle ever to receive it. The SC400 won it against the full field of imported luxury and performance cars available that year, evaluated by a publication that had no institutional interest in favoring Japanese cars over European ones. Car and Driver put it on their 10 best list immediately and left it there through 1996. 5 consecutive years. The list was not a courtesy extension. Cars that did not continue to justify their place were removed. The SC400 justified its place for 5 years because the editors who drove it annually against the field of everything available in its category kept arriving at the same conclusion. The specific comparisons documented in period press provide context that the current market's pricing does not always reflect. Cars.com, quote, S review at launch compared the SC400 directly to the Mercedes 300 CE at $57,000, the Jaguar XJS at $48,000, and the BMW 851 at $80,000. The reviewer concluded at $37,500 that the SC400 competed with all of them without disadvantage, not as a budget alternative, as a genuine competitor in refinement, in quality of materials, in the experience of covering ground. The automotive press, with no reason to be kind to a brand still establishing itself, evaluated the car on its merits and found the merits sufficient. The market's response to this consensus was largely indifferent, and the reasons for the indifference are worth understanding because they explain the SC400's current position better than any quality assessment can. The R129 had heritage, 40 years of the SL as the European roadster standard, established through decades of desirability that predated the current models. The SC400 had 2 years of Lexus history and an LS400 that most buyers could name but not identify from a photograph. Heritage does not appear in road tests. It appears in the conversation at the point of sale when the buyer is choosing between 2 cars they have test-driven and found comparable, and one of them has a name that has meant something to them since childhood, and the other one does not. The SC400 sales collapse from 1992's peak of 27,887 U.S. units to fewer than 1,000 by 2000 was largely driven by the yen's appreciation against the dollar, a currency movement that had nothing to do with the car's engineering and everything to do with the exchange rate that determined its sticker price. By 1996, the SC400 started at $52,400. The fundamental value proposition, a better car for half the price of the famous alternative, was gone. What remained was a well-regarded luxury coupe with no cultural profile, priced near the entry point of the cars it had been built to challenge. The market found this unconvincing. The press, which evaluates cars rather than prices, kept returning the SC400 to its 10 best list regardless. The SC400's ownership reality is almost the precise inverse of the R129 S, where the R129 has a defining maintenance challenge, the hydraulic soft-top system. The SC400 has no equivalent. The 1UZ-FE engine does not have a hydraulic soft-top. It does not have a convertible roof of any kind. The car it powers is a fixed-roof coupe, and its mechanical systems are the same systems found in the LS400 that owners have documented running to 300,000 miles and beyond without internal rebuilds. The engine in the SC400 is the same engine that has been documented to 1 million miles in one specific example. The architecture that produced that result does not change because it has been placed in a coupe rather than a sedan. The SC400's known maintenance items are the timing belt, the power steering pump, and normal consumables, the expected requirements of any car of this vintage maintained correctly. The timing belt on the 1UZ-FE is a scheduled service item rather than a failure item when replaced on schedule. The power steering pump develops leaks on high-mileage examples, as power steering pumps do across the industry. None of these require specialized knowledge or proprietary tools. Any competent mechanic with experience on Toyota products can service an SC400 correctly, and the parts are available through the Toyota supply chain at prices that reflect the scale of Toyota's global production rather than the specialist market for a discontinued German roadster. The SLS Hop, one of the most respected R129 specialists in the United Kingdom, describes interior deterioration on R129S with the specificity of a company that has seen it repeatedly. Sticky overhead panels, cracked sun visors, worn seat bolster trim, a center console armrest knob that breaks off so consistently they consider it a standard repair. The SC400 does not appear in the equivalent literature. Its interior problems, when they occur, are the normal problems of age, not the characteristic failures of a design that included components unsuited to 30-year service. Hagerty's Buyer's Guide, reviewing a factory-preserved SC400 in 2020, observed that the interior felt like a 2-year-old car. The leather, the carpet, the wood, the switchgear, original, intact, and reflecting the construction quality of a manufacturer that built for the long term rather than the showroom. The result is an ownership cost profile that, for equivalent condition examples, runs measurably lower for the SC400 than for the R129. The gap is not enormous in any single year. It is consistent across every year of ownership, and consistency accumulates. An R129 owner who has maintained their car correctly and addressed every issue promptly has spent more money on ownership than an SC400 owner who has done the same. This is not a consequence of neglect. It is a consequence of the engineering decisions that produced the R129, decisions that were correct in 1989 and that carry a cost 35 years later that the car's reputation does not acknowledge. Club Lexus forum threads from owners of high-mileage examples, 150,000 miles, 200,000 miles, higher, describe the same car underneath the added miles, the engine doing what it always did, the systems functioning without drama, the maintenance costs remaining predictable and manageable. The SC400 did not become famous. It became reliable. These are different achievements, and they attract different buyers. Fame generates waiting lists. Reliability generates quiet satisfaction. The market has always valued the former more highly in the short term. The owners who chose the latter are still driving the evidence of that choice. There is a coda to the SC400 story that confirms everything the car represented. Its replacement, the SC430, which arrived in 2001, was designed in Europe rather than California, offered as a retractable hardtop convertible rather than a fixed-roof coupe, and calibrated for comfort rather than the precise, purposeful character of the original. A British television presenter famously called it the worst car in the world, a verdict that is excessive, but that captured something true about the distance between the two cars. The SC400 had been a design statement. The SC430 was a market research exercise. The community that had quietly maintained their SC400S for a decade took the SC430's failure, by reputation if not commercially, as confirmation of what they had always suspected, that what they were driving had been correct in ways the market had not recognized, and that its replacement proved it by contrast. The comparison these two cars produce is not primarily about performance or handling or cabin quality. All three of those dimensions favor different answers at different points in the car's lives and at different points in the conversation, depending on which owner is speaking. The SC400 and the R129 are now available in the market for comparable money. A clean, well-maintained R129 SL500 from the mid-production years, post-facelift, with documented service history and a recent hydraulic roof rebuild. sells for between $15,000 and $25,000, depending on specification and condition. A clean, well-maintained SC400 from a similar period sells for between $8,000 and $15,000. The R129's premium over the SC400, which exceeded $45,000 at launch, has compressed to somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 at equivalent condition levels. This compression reflects the market's collective assessment of the additional cost of owning the Mercedes relative to the Lexus across the ownership period. This used market gap is not sentiment. It is the used car market's pricing of accumulated owner experience, the information that 30 years of operating both cars has generated, expressed as the difference between what buyers are willing to pay. The R129 commands a premium because it is famous and beautiful and historically significant. The SC400 is discounted because it is none of those things. The question is whether the premium is justified by anything beyond the reputation. In terms of the driving experience, the cars are more similar than their reputation suggests. Both are large Grand Tourers with V8 engines and automatic transmissions, calibrated for comfort on long roads rather than communication on technical ones. Neither rewards aggressive driving in the way that a Porsche 911 rewards it. Neither transmits road surface information through the steering with the precision that a dedicated sports car prioritizes. Both are best understood as instruments for covering a significant distance in genuine refinement, arriving no less composed than when the journey began, and making the drive itself feel like something worth undertaking. Within this shared character, the R129 offers more. The M119's engine note has a presence and a willingness to announce itself at high revs that the 1UZ FE's engineering deliberately suppressed in the name of cabin acoustics. The R129's steering has a weight that the SC400's calibration did not prioritize. The convertible element, the roof down, the sky unfiltered, the speed experienced directly, produces an openness that no fixed-roof coupe can honestly replicate. These are real differences that justify a genuine preference, and no honest comparison can pretend otherwise. But the argument for the SC400 is not about the driving experience. It is about the ownership experience. Specifically, the gap between what the two cars promise and what they cost to maintain across a realistic ownership period. The R129's hydraulic system is not a metaphor. The mechanism that made the car feel like the future in 1989 is the same mechanism that requires a four-figure rebuild 30 years later on a schedule that no buyer chooses and no maintenance regime can prevent. The owner who buys an R129 on the strength of its reputation and discovers, 2 years later, that the roof requires comprehensive cylinder replacement has not been deceived about the car's excellence. They have been surprised by a maintenance reality that the car's legend does not mention, because legends do not include maintenance schedules. The SC400 buyer faces no equivalent surprise. The 1UZ FA's maintenance is predictable, documented, and manageable with any competent mechanic familiar with Toyota products. The timing belt is a scheduled service item. The power steering pump is monitored and replaced as needed. The rest of the drivetrain, the transmission, the differential, the cooling system, operates on the same maintenance cadence as any other well-engineered Toyota Vive 8 of the period. There is an engine that has been documented to 1 million miles and a car that was designed to let it reach that number without drama. Here is the specific observation that the comparison produces and that no amount of reputation can resolve. The SC400 was always worth more than its price suggested. In 1992, at $37,500, it was competing with cars at $80,000 and winning the comparison tests. At its mid-decade price of $52,000, it was still competing favorably on merit against everything in its segment. In the current market, at $8,000 to $15,000 for a clean example, It is competing on merit against cars at any price, and winning on the dimension that matters most at age 30, which is not what the car does on its best day, but what it costs to keep it doing that on every day. The R129's value proposition runs in the opposite direction. At $83,000 in 1990, it was worth every dollar for the experience it provided. At $15,000 to $25,000 today, it remains a beautiful and historically significant car, but the gap between what it costs to buy and what it costs to maintain now requires an honest buyer to include the hydraulic rebuild budget in the purchase calculation, in a way that no SC400 buyer is asked to do. The SC400 was always the better investment. It was never the more desirable car. The buyers who chose investment over desirability are still driving it. The buyers who chose desirability are still managing the consequences, and most of them would tell you they would choose desirability again. Both are legitimate outcomes. The comparison exists not to condemn one, but to ensure both are made with full information about what they contain. Two Grand Tours from the same decade, both V8 powered, both rear-wheel drive, both aimed at buyers with enough money to choose something genuinely excellent. Different answers to the same question. The R129 answered with ambition, a rollover bar firing in 0.3 of a second, a hydraulic roof that operated itself, seatbelt systems with 20 patents, a reputation built by timing and association, and a princess who chose it over a century of protocol. The SC400 answered with honesty, a design produced in 3 dimensions at a California studio, an engine documented to 1 million miles, a price at launch of less than half what the famous alternative cost on the same day. The R129 ended up in the museum, parked next to the Pope-mobile. The SC400 still starts every morning on the original engine, for owners who looked past the badge to what was underneath it. The market chose the famous one. 30 years later, the evidence suggests the other one was worth more. Both things are true. Both, at current prices, remain available to anyone willing to look. Before you go, check the link in the description to grab your used car buying guide and avoid getting scammed or overpaying. Trust me, this will help you a lot. Now, click on this next video if you want to understand where the SC400's engine came from, the same 1UZFE V8, the same engineering culture in the car that spent $1 billion proving that Japanese luxury could beat German luxury at half the price. The Lexus LS400 versus the Mercedes W126 S-Class, two of the greatest cheap luxury cars ever built, and the question of which one actually wins when both cost almost nothing. It is right there on your screen.